is there evidence of financial conflicts of interest involving Dr. Fauci and his associates?
There are issues related to financial impropriety and health officials that are currently being reviewed.
Did you see conduct that you believed crossed the line into potential criminal activity?
There does appear to be quite a few conflicts of interest that have been created by decades of this crossing of public health and biodefense.
Are there classified records that indicate the U.S. intelligence community was more involved in high-risk gain-of-function research than previously understood?
Yes. Yes, there was.
What explains the reluctance of the U.S. intelligence community to present evidence that is fact-based and credible about the threat from the Chinese Communist Party?
They're worried that, President Trump might do something crazy that upsets, what we have decided is how the world should work. And frankly, we got globalists working inside the IC.
Of all the investigations, was your work into directed energy weapons the most sensitive, where you met the most resistance?
Yes. Yes. 100% yes.
Did your investigation uncover credible evidence that records about directed energy attacks were destroyed at the CIA?
Yes. They didn't want this stuff coming out because they were part of the team that was involved in these earlier products that came out that were whitewashes. There was a cover-up there that was bigger than COVID.
Why, after so many years of government service, did you decide to become a whistleblower?
The CIA that I joined is not the CIA that we have today. They did everything in their power that, even in this administration, which was incredibly disappointing, to stop the truth from coming out. And the whole point of government service is helping the American public. I think people forget, yeah, you're there to produce intel, you're there to help policymakers make wise decisions, but the whole point is national defense. And if you're going to cover up the most devastating thing that's happened in the last century, well, sorry, it doesn't work for me.
James Erdman III was a senior CIA operations officer who led major investigations for DNI Gabbard's task force known as the DIG, or the Directors Initiatives Group. Erdman's recent explosive Senate testimony revealed credible allegations of a coronavirus cover-up. What happened 2 days before you testified before the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee about the origins of COVID-19?
I had a subpoena. I was issued a subpoena. It was issued the week prior. I was out of the office. The subpoena hearing was on a Wednesday. I got back in the office Monday morning. I gave the subpoena to the CIA. I gave it to my supervisor. I said, please send this to the Office of General Counsel. I've been subpoenaed. I intend to appear. Please let me know what I need to do. Here's my phone number. Here's my address. They already had it. And I waited. I waited for some sort of contact from the Office of General Counsel all day Monday. I don't hear back. Don't hear a thing. So I wait all day Tuesday, and I don't hear a thing, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm going. And I was planning on going regardless. It's a subpoena. Last I checked, we're not allowed to obstruct a Senate subpoena. So it's 7:30 at night. I had just gotten done speaking with my lawyer, and I was dropping her off at her hotel when I get a call, again, 7:30, the night before the hearing, and it's CIA OGC saying, hey, Jim, we're calling to let you know we're going to have to direct you to not appear at the hearing. And so I said, well, I'm going to have to direct you to my lawyer. And you're in luck. My lawyer's in the car with me. So here you go. My lawyer gets on the phone and she says the right thing. What is the regulations, the case law that permits you to obstruct a Senate subpoena? And they went back and forth. We tried getting as much done as we could that evening, make sure that I understood the process. And I sent an email to CIA saying, hey, this needs to be cleared by 7 a.m. The hearing's at 10. I'm going to be going. I basically said I'm going, come hell or high water. So I showed up. And I think that's part of the reaction that came from the CIA spokesperson. It was a little emotional.
Well, let's just remind people, the CIA spokesperson called your congressional testimony dishonest political theater. You thought what?
That's insane. The only reason they'd say something like that is they simply didn't want what they knew Senator Paul was digging into out in the public sphere.
When you sat in the witness chair in the Senate committee and you saw that no Democrats were participating, what went through your head?
I was sincerely disappointed. There should be nothing political about COVID origins. This is not, the other side is politicizing it at that point. There should be both sides wanting to hear what happened behind the intelligence community's secrecy curtain. I think everybody should want to hear that. They want to know, hey, listen, are we actually pursuing the truth? This is not a partisan issue.
You led the investigation for Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard into the origins of COVID-19. Do you believe the Senate committee will get Dr. Fauci in the chair this week?
I do. I think, I pray, but I do think so. I'm an optimist at heart. I think it's incredibly important to get him in the chair because if we want to see accountability, it's going to be questioning that he can't squirm out of.
You've seen the intelligence. What records and discussions should the senators focus on with Dr. Fauci?
They need to focus on contracts, for example, agreements between agencies, health agencies, whether it's NIH, NIAID, HHS. Those MOUs, those contracts and agreements, and elements of the intelligence community. If we're talking about dangerous gain of function, which is exactly what we're talking about, and Dr. Anthony Fauci knew that was dangerous gain of function, you're going to want to take a look at the money. Follow the money. Where does that go? That is the first and most important step.
Is there evidence of financial conflicts of interest involving Dr. Fauci and his associates?
I would say that that's a sensitive matter that I can't go into too much detail. I will say there are issues related to financial impropriety and health officials that are currently being reviewed.
Can you provide any more detail?
I wish I could, other than to say that I think if you follow the money, you will definitely identify some things that at a minimum need some examination.
Did you see conduct that you believed crossed the line into potential criminal activity?
With regard to Dr. Anthony Fauci, his involvement in trying to push a narrative into the IC, I don't know if that rises to a legal piece unless there's finances and financial investigation that goes along with it. In terms of potentially health officials or former health officials, yes, I do believe there is evidence of financial impropriety that deserves additional attention. There does appear to be quite a few conflicts of interest that have been created by decades of this crossing of public health and biodefense. And Anthony Fauci, he had to know. He's at the top of, he's been in federal government service for 50 years. And 40 of it, give or take, 40 of it, maybe 38 as NIAID director. And he knew who was getting what funds for what research.
Senator Rand Paul has released records that show Customs and Border Protection wanted to stop and interview a scientist, Peter Daszak, in 2021, but it was blocked by the FBI. Your reaction?
What I'll say is Peter Daszak was at the center of this problem. There's a lot of information related to him and EcoHealth Alliance, their contracts with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and I'm not surprised that the FBI intervened.
When you were doing your investigation, did you come across episodes like this where one law enforcement branch or one intelligence agency would sort of intervene to stop another agency from gathering intelligence?
Yes, I've seen that in the investigations that I was involved in, yes.
Did the CIA refuse to provide records to DNI Gabbard's investigative team?
Yes.
My reporting is that a number of requests for operational reports were refused.
That is correct. If Director Gabbard wants to collect those records to get an investigation, it's very, very necessary. If I'm running an intelligence operation, one of the first things I do is put a timeline together, and I put on that timeline every piece of information that goes in there. We start linking it with people. We start linking it with all sorts of things. You need the whole timeline. If there is information available, you want it there to make that final assessment.
Are there classified records that indicate the U.S. intelligence community was more involved in high-risk gain-of-function research than previously understood?
Yes. Yes, there was. And again, this is why we really needed a whole of government cooperation on this issue. We had lots of support from HHS and Secretary Kennedy. We had lots of support from elements of the U.S. government. We need to get a handle on everything, and it's so complex. If we leave one piece out, we're not going to answer the question. And the intelligence community has relationships with elements of public health and our scientific cadre that have definitely had ties to dangerous gain-of-function research. And we're on the verge of a big problem if we don't get a handle on it, because there are dangerous viruses that are worldwide, in labs worldwide, and this research has not been stopped.
Is there any scenario under which Anthony Fauci or some of his associates actually go to jail?
I think the scenario that's going to be most likely, in my opinion, you have to take a close look at contracts and money changing hands. Who gets the money and what happened just prior and just after they received the money? When I say contracts, whether it's grants, whether it's research money, whether there's memorandums of understanding between agencies, it's going to require people to take a very close look at the finances. The other piece too is I'm happy to see that Dr. Anthony Fauci will not be able to squirm out of questions in a public hearing. I think we can challenge the possibility of his pardon, but let's say you can't challenge the pardon. When he testifies, he can't take the fifth. He can't lie to Congress either. So he's got to answer the question. And there's only so many times you can say, well, I can't recall.
And this email in particular is going to what looks like a conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Erdman and his team tackled the declassification of records, weaponization, as well as the politicization of U.S. intelligence. With these election integrity investigations, was there any opposition or pushback from intelligence agencies?
For sure, for sure. You know, there were sensitive compartments that you need to read some of this stuff. NSA was very helpful. It was easy to work with NSA. It was like pulling teeth with spoons when it came to the CIA. In fact, I even know anecdotally, Kurt Olson was appointed by the White House to lead the election security stuff, and there were people in the director's office bitching and moaning about having to turn over documents to Kurt Olson. Sorry, guys, he's appointed by the White House. I don't care if you like him. I don't care if you like his background. It's not an illegal order.
How does this happen under a Trump administration, that there's all this pushback to President Trump's directives?
Well, we haven't cleaned house. I mean, it sounds sort of draconian. Oh, we got to clean house. Well, we do. I mean, frankly, it's clear we do at this point. It should have been, Roger, sir, I'm on it. That is how this should have worked.
This email was released, and it talks about deliberately massaging the president's daily brief. As someone who's spent their career in the intelligence community, is that a big deal?
That's a huge deal. I saw an example of that with COVID. There's an email. I don't know if it'll ever get released, but it's like, hey, listen, we don't want to put that out because we might have to send it up to the president's daily brief, actual email. And I totally believe it as well because, frankly, no one wants to touch when Trump was in office, there was a hesitancy to go up against China. And I don't have the answer to that. I wish I did. I don't know why on God's green earth we'd be afraid to give our president truthful information, but it was always toning things down.
These records got a lot of attention. They were instant messages sent by a senior FBI official, Nikki Flores, and she talks about running a shadow government across the FBI at this point. Is there a shadow government?
I don't know if people say I'm part of wearing their shadow government t-shirts in the building where they're like, I'm part of the shadow government. But there's certainly people who believe that they are the adults in the room and they're here to make sure that the political leaders that are in charge, we can't let them do anything too crazy. We're here to make sure we temper their worst
Tendencies.
Tendencies, thank you. I think that, in effect, what you have are people who act as a shadow government, whether they know they're doing it or not.
Also, in this instant message, it says that all election-related IIRs, these are intelligence reports, must come through FBI headquarters. Does this show that there was an effort to keep all of this election information on a close hold so that they could control it?
Yeah, of course. In my opinion, that's exactly what that means. If they're trying to get a handle on every single report that comes in and centrally locate it, okay, there might be some reason why you want to do that, but it sure doesn't look good. Not if you're over there also saying, hey, man, I'm part of the shadow government.
Are you familiar with the whistleblower complaint that was lodged about the suppression of intelligence about China's election activities in 2020?
Yes, I'm aware of it.
What can you share with us?
I don't want to go too much into that specific whistleblower complaint, but I will say that I have spoken to many people who are involved in the COVID origins analysis, people who were both on the operational side and the analytical side. And that is 100% believable because the same sort of things are happening in other topics that touch on China. So yeah, we had whistleblowers say, yeah, they did not want to harm China.
What explains the reluctance of the U.S. intelligence community to present evidence that is fact-based and credible about the threat from the Chinese Communist Party?
They're worried that, President Trump might do something crazy that upsets, what we have decided is how the world should work. And frankly, we got globalists working inside the IC. And last I checked, we work for America. We're not here to ensure that NATO gets their funding or the UN is supported or the WHO can help us with our pandemic response. There are quite a few people who are more than willing to say, hey, listen, this globalist thing is a good thing. So you had that. I think there was probably, based on what we're seeing with regard to former President Biden's family, there were a whole lot of ties to China.
You testified that when DNI Gabbard's investigative team was shut down, that the CIA took control of about 40 boxes of files about MK Ultra and the JFK assassination. What happened exactly?
First of all, there was no raid. There were documents in a facility, and DIG personnel had access to the room where the documents were. Once the DIG was shut down, that access to that room ended. We no longer had that. Now, there were still some documents in a safe with the DIG that I hope that Acting Director Pulte gets out the door.
Why is control of the MK Ultra files and the JFK assassination files seem so important to the CIA?
I think, particularly with MK Ultra, we'll start with that. It sure looks like they did some really naughty things, and they don't want to be embarrassed. I'm of the opinion at this point, especially with JFK and MK Ultra, put all those documents out. Let those people who have been following this issue, civilians who have been following this issue for decades, they're the ones who are going to pull the little nuggets out of that.
Did the CIA fully cooperate with DNI Gabbard's investigations?
No, not at all. And here's, in my opinion, this is how they operate. They're the adult in the room. They say, hey, listen, we've got these concerns, and they'll bring up every bureaucratic reason why we need to slow roll and just double check everything, dot I's, cross T's. Again, there's good reasons to dot I's and cross T's, but it's bureaucratic guerrilla warfare. So that's how it starts. Once they start into that, they're looking for anything that goes wrong so that they can say, oh, I don't know, something's going wrong over here.
Do you stand by your testimony that the CIA illegally monitored and spied on DNI Gabbard's investigative team?
I do.
What's the evidence?
And if you're having a private conversation on a secure line with a whistleblower, you know what you don't want? You don't want a surprise visitor on some sort of listening in. And that is what happened. According to the IT people over at DNI, that requires a technical fix. A technical, like somebody has to go do something to make that happen. And when we started looking at where the individual was working that was on the other line, it's over at a CIA office involved in breaking into phone lines. And you can't make this up. So you're like, that's a little strange. Oh, and one day after We interviewed a person came in as a whistleblower on the COVID investigation, and one day later he was fired by China Mission Center.
Why would the CIA want to disrupt these investigations?
It's a really good question. There's clearly some people who did not want the things that were being discovered released in the manner that they were being released.
The Russia collusion documents were a main priority for President Trump.
Yes,
What was your experience getting those records?
that was difficult, very difficult.
It's the summer of 2025,
Yes,
and we have these Russia collusion records coming out for the first time.
yes,
Is there tension between the CIA and the Director of National Intelligence?
yes. I'll give you a background. The documents that were released, that Director Gabbard released, those were written 2017, 2018 by HIPSI staffers. In fact, Kash Patel was involved in the writing of those documents. And they were very thorough. They were the rebuttal of the whole thing that Trump is just a pawn of Russia. He's a spot, whatever they wanted to call him, whatever treasonous thing they wanted to call him. It was the rebuttal. It was very well sourced. It was very well written. It had a lot of backing. Now, this was a House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence product, but CIA insisted that because of the classification level, that document had to stay in a safe inside the CIA. And I think one important thing to remember about this, and during Trump's first administration, Director Radcliffe was Director DNI. He could have gotten this released during the first admin.
I have the CIA note from June of 2025, and it's about the Russia collusion documents and the intelligence assessment. And the part that caught my attention is sort of the bottom line, the lessons learned. And it says that the intelligence community assessment about the 2016 election departed from established processes and tradecraft, but it was fundamentally sound analysis.
Yeah, that's a pretty big statement considering the list of things that went wrong. Now, we're dealing with smart people, Brennanites, who have been, like I said, scurrying around the building. They got to get this paper out before anything else gets out, because that statement right there protects former Director Brennan. He can go in front of a court of law, wave it around and say, hey, listen, even this administration says it's fundamentally sound. Yeah, there were problems. We rushed things. That was the adult in the room coming in. Listen, we're taking a very, very measured look at this. But that was a whitewash. And they wanted to get it out in advance of Director Gabbard. And they wanted to get ahead of it. They wanted to ensure that Brennan, when he goes to court, can wave it and say, hey, this is my get out of jail free card.
Working for the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, you ran multiple investigations. Of all the investigations, was your work into directed energy weapons the most sensitive, where you met the most resistance?
Yes. Yes. 100% yes. There was certainly resistance in other ways on the COVID investigation. UAP, given the scoping of what we did, maybe it's just there wasn't an opportunity for more resistance than what we got. But by far, our Havana Syndrome investigation received the most resistance.
And resistance from which agency?
The CIA.
What explained it?
Well, people in positions of power at the CIA who are on the 7th floor, they didn't want this stuff coming out because they were part of the team that was involved in these earlier products that came out that were whitewashes.
Has there been any consequence for the top CIA analyst who oversaw the flawed reports into COVID-19 origins and directed energy attacks, also known as Havana Syndrome?
There is no accountability. In the case of COVID, seniors involved in that have happily retired, or in some cases have been promoted to SIS. In the case of AHI, the individuals involved in that are still happily employed, despite what looks to be, in fact, Havana Syndrome looks worse than COVID in terms of the kind of activity that occurred. And again, it's my opinion. There was a cover-up there that was bigger than COVID.
Did it bother you personally as someone who has worked in the military, the State Department, and the CIA?
Yeah, it became clear to me that this problem was actually worse when it comes to a cover-up. There are real people who have been harmed from Department of War, from the intelligence community, from Department of State, civilians. And by the way, it's also a national security threat. Like it or not, if you can shoot a ray gun at a distance without anybody knowing and you can kill somebody, that means our president is in danger, our vice president is in danger, elected officials are in danger, people that the other side doesn't like, they're all in danger. And if we don't treat it like a national security threat, if we bury it in the sand, we're doing exactly the opposite of our job.
Putting the investigation to one side, is it your personal belief that a foreign adversary and a novel weapon are responsible?
I think that we'd be foolish not to consider the possibility that a foreign adversary is involved, and we'd be foolish not to consider that possibility.
Did your investigation uncover credible evidence that records about directed energy attacks were destroyed at the CIA?
Yes. And the individual and I can't go into too much detail other than to say that information was given to the CIA to take action. It was passed from the principal deputy director's office over to the deputy director's office, as I understand it, and nothing has happened. The individual responsible for destroying those records still works at the Counterintelligence Mission Center.
Can you tell us more about the records that were destroyed?
I can't say what records were destroyed. I do know that those records were being destroyed according to a credible first-hand whistleblower.
Were the records destroyed after it became known that DNI Gabbard's team was investigating directed energy attacks?
If you decide that you want to start destroying documents after you realize that there's an investigation into the thing you were involved in, that points towards guilt, in my opinion. Yes, it was after Director Gabbard started working this issue, they found out about it because, well, they were monitoring our communications and monitoring our whistleblowers. So, yeah, I think they got nervous. They said it would better start getting rid of some evidence.
Well, just to be clear, the destruction of federal records is a criminal offense.
Oh, it's a criminal offense.
And you're saying you shared this with the CIA to take action?
Yes.
Against this individual?
Yes.
And you're not aware that anything's happened?
As far as I know, the individual is still working at the Counterintelligence Mission Center.
Did the CIA fully support the acquisition of what was suspected to be a directed energy weapon by Homeland Security Investigations and the Defense Department?
I can't speak on that issue in any kind of detail, but I think it's very, very important that the government declassify all information related to that acquisition. It's already in public press. I think it's important to have a full public hearing on things that are harming not just intelligence officers, but Department of War, military personnel, civilians. So I sincerely hope that part of the declassification efforts that go forward address all aspects of what has come out in public reporting.
What did it take for DNI Gabbard to recall these two intelligence assessments by the Biden administration about directed energy attacks that concluded it was very unlikely a foreign adversary and a novel weapon were responsible?
It took her to the very end of her time as DNI, which should tell you a lot about how much work had to go into just getting those through the front door. And also keeping in mind that there's a whole written product that still has not been declassified. There was a great deal of resistance. I don't care what people have said in public hearings in front of the Senate and Congress. She had to work very hard to get just those two simple retractions out the door. And it should not have been like that. It should have happened right away. It could have happened last fall.
Last fall?
Last fall. I believe it could have happened last fall.
Which agency was pushing back the hardest?
CIA.
Why?
In my personal opinion, I think we have some analysts that need to be fired over at the CIA over the Havana Syndrome issue. They actively covered up this issue and in the process harmed a lot of good people. So I think there was a lot to lose.
I've been doing reporting on this for over a year as an independent journalist, and One of the things I hear consistently from U.S. government personnel who are affected by directed energy attacks is that they believe that there is an insider threat. Did your team investigate the possibility that there is an insider threat?
There are insider threats that are an issue in the U.S. government, and we need to take it very, very seriously.
Is that limited to directed energy attacks, or is it broader than that?
Oh, it's broader than that. In fact, the one surprising thing that came out of all the investigations, there is a counterintelligence issue that I think has been left unaddressed in a number of the investigations that we have to take a look at.
Did you lead the investigation into UAPs?
I did, and actually, that's the one I was. I'll say I was happiest with the outcome of that. I wish I could talk in more detail about what the findings were. It's up to the principal deputy director, Aaron Lucas, to make sure that information gets out to the public. But here's what I will say about it. Unless someone shows you firsthand evidence of an alien, unless someone shows you firsthand evidence of an item that is being, whatever it is, reverse engineered, or unless people come forward and say, here's the evidence that this is the crash retrieval program, you should maintain a healthy degree of skepticism. There are real national security incidents that have occurred from they've been reported by credible people. And I tend to believe fighter pilots and submariners that have a lot on the line to come forward and say things. I tend to believe them. If they're coming forward and saying something, you should believe them. But the problem is, those are national security threats. I think we should define them as national security threats, treat them as that, conduct the investigation, but be very cautious about what is being released publicly about UFOs.
Why cautious?
Because there's a whole crap ton of disinformation out there and lies, and there's grift. We have to be very, very careful.
Do you believe that there are more UAP records that have yet to be released?
Of course. Given, and I'll say, in CIA's defense on this issue, we really didn't ask for a ton from them. There's a couple things we would have liked to have gotten from them, but I can't say that the resistance on that issue really was huge from CIA on that issue. But certainly, given the scope of our investigation, yes, for sure, there's more work that can be done. What I appreciate about what we were tasked to do, we quickly discovered that given the personnel that we had, given the resources, and given what we discovered just as we started the investigation, we had a counterintelligence issue that needed to be clearly defined so that anybody who picks up the baton going forward can focus on the real national security threats that have to be investigated.
Did you come away from the UAP investigation believing that there are communities, civilizations, life forms outside the Earth?
No, not from the investigation. Personally, I want to believe that. I would like to believe that, but no, from the investigation, I did not come away believing that there are UFOs.
So what are you doing now?
I think a lot of people who leave government service and want to jump into something else, they have the same problem. You join government service because you're patriotic, or you want a mission, or you want to jump out of planes and kill people for a living. Who knows? Whatever it is, you want to be part of something bigger. You want to be part of the military. And so when you leave and you hear people talking about expense reports and financial audits and everything else and making money so a product gets sold, it's hard. So I decided I'm going to stay in the nonprofit space. And to my benefit, I actually co-founded the nonprofit I'm now involving myself with. Feds for Freedom is an organization. It was born during the COVID vaccine mandates. We sued the federal government over vaccine mandates. We were successful. We got an injunction that saved over 400,000 federal government jobs from having to take the vaccine. We filed 3 federal lawsuits on that front, 17 class action EEOs, 6 of which are still working their way through the EEO system, if you can believe that, a half decade later. We got involved in other issues that deal with constitutional governance and holding the government accountable for reform and transparency. fact, on June 30th, we sued the CIA. We sued the CIA because they decided, and it came out last year, or the information became available last year, that anyone non-compliant with the vaccine mandates, they were investigated by the Counterespionage Department. That's thousands of employees. So instead of treating it like an employee insubordination issue, they said, yeah, you might be a spy, which is abhorrent. As an intelligence officer, that is absolutely the worst thing you can label somebody. Internally, we tried to get the CIA to just deal with it. We just wanted them to expunge the permanent security file, because that stays on your file for the rest of it. Doesn't matter where you go. It's on your permanent security file that an investigation occurred. Just get rid of it. This administration said the vaccine mandate, they never would have done it. They think it was abhorrent. You have Secretary Hegseth saying it was illegal, conducted illegally. Just get rid of it. They wouldn't do it. We went through a number of administrative processes, internal. They wouldn't do it. So a few CIA officers filed a lawsuit, and Feds for Freedom is supporting it financially, providing free legal support for it, class action. And so I'm working for Feds for Freedom now, and I continue to hope that we can, from the outside, ensure that the federal government is actually doing what the American public wants. You can call them up, ask a question, get an answer, and there's transparency, accountability, and reform.
What should the public know about Tulsi Gabbard and her time as Director of National Intelligence?
I think you need to judge by actions. So she was tasked with conducting IC reform. So she reduced the size of the DNI. She released more information, I think, than any other IC professional in history. She did it under her watch. She pulled back bad reports. She created a team to help her execute EOs. She, pound for pound, this administration, I think she's the only one who actually conducted IC reform and did exactly what President Trump was asking her to do, which is ironic considering that she got so much resistance from her IC partners, and frankly, in my opinion, from people up at circling around the White House as well, and the NSC. So I may have come forward and said something publicly. You shouldn't believe me. She provided documents that helped prove what I was saying was true, so I'm grateful for that. I don't want to be remembered as a liar. She also let the American public in on something they deserve to know.
Are there finished reports from DNI Gabbard's investigative team that could be released today?
I believe so, yeah. Yeah, there are. COVID, AHI, for sure. UAP has some products that I think the principal deputy director, that's under his purview, that he could take a look at and make sure it gets to the public, yeah.
If Jay Clayton is confirmed as DNI, as he walks in the door, could he just release all these reports?
Sure. I mean, there'll probably still be some redactions in there, and some of them might be for good reason. But yeah, he could. And if he doesn't, well, we have a clue whether or not we're going to get the kind of accountability that we want.
You've served this country through the military, through the State Department, and through the CIA. Then you became a whistleblower. Was it worth it?
Yes. You're going to be destroyed. Don't do it unless you're serious about it. But my advice, seek out somebody who's done it before. They'll help you do it to help you. Feds for Freedom has a bunch of folks that are whistleblowers. All the FBI whistleblowers you've seen on TV, they were part of Feds for Freedom from the very beginning. We'll help protect you, so come to us. The other advice I'll give is don't complain about getting punched if you're going to get in the arena, okay? Nobody wants another martyr, okay? COVID was a mess. We've heard all the stories. We know that it was draconian and horrible to everybody involved who didn't want the vaccine. That story's been played out. If you're going to get in the ring and fight, get in the ring and fight, and don't whine about it. Nobody's going to join if you get in the ring and fight and then decide, well, I'm out. So if you're going to do it, you better be committed.